Yo, what up, what up? It's your man, Big Brandon Carter. I recently changed my name to King Keto because, I'm big on the ketogenic diet. I've been doing it for over a year. I've had amazing health benefits, mental clarity. My cholesterol dropped over 100 points. I've been able to put on muscle and stay lean. And when I cut, I'm able to cut fat and maintain the muscle. But what's even better is I have a ton of energy when I do it. And I've helped a lot of other people with that too. I was like, yeah, I'm the keto king. But unfortunately, I am not. The real keto king is Dr. Dom D'agostino. All right, he is a medical researcher and real doctor who has basically pioneered a lot of the information that's out here about the ketogenic diet. And it's someone who I've actually looked up to when I was first getting into keto. He's someone whose work really inspired me. So it's an honor to interview him. We're going to talk about how to do the ketogenic diet, all the different ways you may be able to benefit from it. And then we're also going to, most importantly, dispel all the myths. Every time I talk about keto, there's always someone in the comments saying it's going to kill you, or, it's bad for your health, or it's not sustainable. And we're going to dispel each and every one of those rumors one by one. Dom is an esteemed, legit medical doctor. So you guys hear this stuff from me, you think, oh, Brandon's just a dumb bro or a dumb jock, and that's true, right? So that's why I wanted to get a legit doctor, a legit researcher on this video for you to really get the facts. If you don't believe me, man, believe the doctors, believe the people who are pioneering the advancement of health. So without any further ado, here's my interview with the great Dominic D'agostino. Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Brandon Carter, and I'm here with a very special guest. This is Dr. Dom. I always say your last name wrong. D'agostino?
That was perfect. Yeah.
Nice. Man, Dom is would you call yourself a scientist or a doctor or?
Yeah, I'm a research scientist. I'm a faculty at USF, so I do teaching. So half of what I do is teaching, like medical students, and then the other half is research.
And you have a lot of studies that have been, in like big peer-reviewed journals, like you're highly acclaimed, like people. And you've also probably heard them on Joe Rogan's podcast, Tim Ferriss' podcast, Bulletproof Radio, Dave Asprey, like everywhere. And you're a specialist in the ketogenic diet.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the cornerstone of my research, but I'm a physiologist too and a pharmacologist. So we also do, drug research. We do cancer research on various things. So, and that's probably what makes me a little bit different, is that I do have my hands in a lot of different pots, and I do study a lot of different things, from the ketogenic diet and different versions of the ketogenic diet to even the development of ketone supplements that can mimic certain aspects of the diet.
Yeah, I want to get into all of that stuff, so how it pertains to the ketogenic diet, how it pertains to cancer, and actually ketone supplements. But first, but just for those who don't know what the ketogenic diet is, and they're sick of me telling them about it, maybe someone smart can just give them a brief overview, and that'd be great.
Yeah, it's real simple, actually. In the simplest terms, it's a macronutrient ratio of the diet in terms of fats, proteins, and carbohydrates that gets your body to switch to using fat and ketone bodies for fuel. And the origins of the diet date back to the effects of fasting. And fasting the ketogenic diet mimics fasting in many ways, in that it gets your body into the state of ketosis, kind of dependent upon the suppression of the hormone insulin. And we know that when we suppress insulin, it really drives our body into a fat burning mode.
Yeah.
In the 1920s, they realized that we could sustain this state of ketosis, which was only associated with fasting. They could sustain it with a diet that would allow someone to stay in ketosis indefinitely if they had seizures, right? So if you shifted the diet to include primarily fat, moderate amount of protein, enough to prevent protein deficiency, and a tiny amount of carbohydrates, just, a small amount from fiber and things like that, that we could maintain the state. So dating back a century ago, the diet was formulated specifically for epilepsy.
Oh, so it's not a fad? It's 100 years old? Everyone keeps telling me it's a fad.
No. Yeah, it's actually a metabolic-based therapy that was used. Yeah,
it was used to treat certain diseases, right?
Yeah, for seizure disorders. And then over the years, I think the biggest application now is for weight loss, fat loss, and maybe type 2 diabetes is becoming kind of like the low-hanging fruit. People are very responsive to the ketogenic diet. It quickly gets them off of insulin and drugs to control their glucose levels. But there's many. So
this is like a diet. Instead of taking drugs, people are using actually like just changing their diet.
Absolutely, yeah. Food is medicine. That's the
amazing.
Whole kind of thing, right? And the ketogenic diet, and I kind of emphasize that it is a very powerful metabolic-based therapy that needs, if you're going to use it for the metabolic management of a disease, you should really team up with a registered dietitian who's trained to administer the ketogenic diet, especially like what you would call the classic ketogenic diet, which is pretty strict and needs to be regimented to sustain higher levels of ketosis that we know are therapeutic.
In the classic, that's like 80 to 90% fat.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that would be for pediatric epilepsy, where with adult epilepsy, they use what's called a modified ketogenic diet or a modified Atkins. And that's about 20 to 25% protein and maybe 60 to 70% fat.
And that's what people are also using that particular protocol. That's what I do, right? And I track it. I track everything. I'm over here weighing stuff. And that's what they use for like body composition too. Because a lot of my listeners are concerned with body composition. Is there any benefits over this, like if you wanted to lose weight, the ketogenic diet for body composition, as opposed to just regular caloric restriction or a caloric deficit? Are there any? What are the advantages of the ketogenic diet over that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot, and I think that people are realizing that there are many benefits to people, and it's the ketogenic diet is not a fad, and it's never going to die out because it works.
It works.
Yeah. But for some people, I would say in a body recomposition kind of scenario is that they don't tolerate carbs too well, like from a physiological standpoint, but even almost from a psychological standpoint, like being able to calculate your macros to, calorie restrict with a certain amount of carbs, it sends people's glucose up and down throughout the day and insulin up and down when you're bolusing carbohydrates throughout the day. Whereas if you approach body composition alterations or, bodybuilding, fitness or whatever with a ketogenic diet or a low carb diet that puts you into ketosis, it suppresses the hormone insulin, and it essentially abolishes or attenuates those spikes in glucose and insulin that can trigger cravings for things. So it allows you, it makes calorie restriction more feasible and easier to do. But we have to understand too that when we're calorie restricting, that's impacting our overall metabolism over time. So our metabolism changes as we're losing weight and even as our body composition changes. If we get lean, we're more sensitive to things like, insulin and leptin and ghrelin and these types of things that have effects on our appetite. So I think it's important not to cut calories too radically in the beginning, especially with a ketogenic diet, because it's easy to do, because it does have a satiating effect and helps you control your appetite to the point where your appetite's not controlling you, your cravings are not controlling you. So it kind of makes dieting a lot easier, and you lose weight fast because by suppressing insulin plays a big role in sodium reabsorption in the kidneys. So you tend to excrete some sodium in the beginning, and with sodium, water comes with that, and with some glycogen too, you lose some glycogen in your liver primarily. you lose some glycogen in your muscles, and you might lose a little bit of that fullness in the beginning.
Fullness, yeah.
But after about 4 to 6 weeks, especially if you're getting in the calories and the fats, that fullness will come back, and you'll be surprised that it's easier to maintain. So I think when people start the ketogenic diet, it's really important to supplement with minerals, to make sure you're getting adequate amounts of sodium, magnesium, because you're going to be losing these things faster, and to actually not calorie restrict, to maybe if you do so, just do it in a very moderate way, because your appetite will be suppressed. So it kind of makes calorie restriction feasible for those people who found it very difficult in the beginning. But you don't want to, turn down your metabolism too much. You want to kind of keep the calories coming in. You want to be more liberal with your protein than like a medical ketogenic diet, and not 10%, more like 20 and even upwards of 30%. And that's going to, protein also has an appetite, like a satiating effect, appetite suppressing effect. So these are just like some of the general pointers that
that's
I
a
would
good
recommend.
tip. I mean, because carbohydrates I've noticed they make me hungry. So like when I'm on a ketogenic diet, like ever since about a year ago, I switched the ketogenic diet, and a lot of your work helped me get there, helped me make that decision, and man, it's just, I'm not like hungry, like the same way I was when I calorie restricted, when I had a bunch of carbs. So that's what I say to all the guys. Oh, keto doesn't matter, or it doesn't help. You can just eat whatever you can eat whatever you want, as long as you're in a caloric deficit. But it's like, how do you feel? That's the difference.
Yeah.
I feel way better. I have more energy, and I'm not as hungry. Why am I less hungry? You can touch on a little bit on keto, and why do I have more energy in a keto when I do calorie restrict, rather than when I calorie restrict eating, whatever?
Yeah, it depends kind of on your diet. So if you have weight to lose fast, like there's no better way than the ketogenic diet. If you have all the time in the world, say you have like 16 weeks, 20 weeks to prepare for whether it be competition or the beach or whatever, and you give yourself a lot of time, calorie restriction, is using like an if it fits your macros approach or things like that, is possible. But the ketogenic diet will make it substantially easier for a number of reasons. Kind of some of the things that I hit on is that when you restrict calories, your glucose availability to the brain will become a little bit less. So your brain goes through what I call like a glucose withdrawal, especially during periods of eating. Your body becomes more sensitive to the hormone insulin. So, and what I noticed is that when I did kind of a fish and rice sort of dieting phase, going back like 10 years ago before I knew about the ketogenic diet,
right.
My glucose would spike up, and about 2 hours later, I would be I would get the shakes. I would be
starving, right? Yeah.
Kind of my sympathetic nervous system would be activated and kind of feel unwell, kind of uneasy. And this was pretty, pronounced in me. And then I didn't jump immediately into a ketogenic diet, but did more of a low carb and just kind of phased out. And I felt better, but not as good as I felt on the ketogenic diet when my body was making ketones. So the ketones can largely replace glucose as a fuel for your brain once you're adapted to it. So what that means from a practical point of view is that when your brain is kind of senses that your glucose is low, maybe you released a little bit of insulin, and then your peripheral tissues sucked up glucose and decreased availability to the brain. If your ketone levels are elevated in your blood, then your brain senses, has a number of different energy sensing mechanisms. It senses that it's okay, and it doesn't cause a stress response, and it doesn't alter, in a negative way, the hormonal regulation that your brain kind of regulates in a very fine-tuned way. So ketones, from a neuroscience and even an epileptologist point of view, and there's books written about this, it keeps the brain in a state of homeostasis.
Right.
And I think that's really important from a dieting scenario, is that keeping your brain happy by elevating these ketone bodies, which ensures that it has sufficient and adequate fuel available, is really important, because when you do go on a calorie restricted, carbohydrate based dieting scenario, your glucose is bouncing up and down. And with that, your psychology
Yeah.
is going to be bouncing up and down, and your attitude, your motivation, your energy levels for mental tasks, for the gym. People adapt to it over time, but it's much more of, there's many benefits to a ketogenic diet where you don't have to go through those negative effects of dieting. It helps attenuate. It doesn't completely abolish it, but it helps really attenuate that. And a lot of people, over time, I really liked fatty foods, fatty, salty foods instead of sweet foods. And your palate changes over time. So when I started the ketogenic diet, initially I would crave, there's certain things that I would eat, like pizza and ice cream and fruit too. And I just don't crave those things as much anymore.
I've had the same,
don't have control over me. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had the same experience, and a lot of my clients have too. Every time I talk about the ketogenic diet, there's always some people, maybe a lot of people, that say, man, I'm gonna die. My cholesterol is gonna go up, and I'm gonna die and get a heart attack. But like I was telling you before we got on, when I first started, I was doing it, if it fits your macros kind of diet, and I got good results from an aesthetic point of view. I was ripped and had muscles, but I went in for a checkup and my cholesterol was like crazy high, and they wanted to put me on statins. And then I decided to try. I had heard it up to that point that the ketogenic diet actually helps lower cholesterol. And it didn't make sense because you're getting so much fat and maybe potentially a lot of cholesterol depending on the fat sources. It didn't make sense. But I say, hey, what do I try it? If not, I guess I'll just hop on these meds. But my cholesterol actually dropped 100 points within the first month of trying to keep a ketogenic diet. Why did that happen? And should people be scared of getting high cholesterol and heart attacks from doing a ketogenic diet? That's one of the main points people are scared of.
Yeah. Do you know, like, a breakdown? Is that I'm assuming that's your total cholesterol. Do you know what your LDL and your HDL cholesterol was, and your triglycerides? So I would kind of be interesting. Everyone has, I see certain trends with the ketogenic diet, but, some people are unique metabolic entities and have pretty dramatic responses. So I'm trying to get
I don't remember my triglycerides, but I remember my HDL, my total cholesterol was like almost 300, right? Oh. And my HDL was only 10.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really low.
That's really low. And I don't even, they were like, yo, what's happening? I feel like I feel fine. And then, but when I don't remember the exact numbers after a month of the ketogenic diet, but I know they got up to a point where my doctor was like, wow, this is great. Cool. Yeah. Like, so what's that about? Why did eating these fats actually improve my cholesterol levels?
Yeah. So cholesterol is a pretty controversial topic in many ways. So I'm going to take a step back a little bit. And I think the primary thing that is a good reflection of your overall metabolic health is the level of inflammation, like things like CRP, but we could talk about that later, but your triglyceride levels. So the levels of fat in your blood are typically elevated in people, and I see this all the time, like hundreds of people send me blood work, that follow ketogenic diets, before and after. And on a carbohydrate-based diet, especially if there's surplus calories coming in, their triglycerides are, through the roof, like 300-400. So that's fat floating around in your blood. These fats can become oxidized. They can damage your blood vessels. They can do bad things if they're, floating around in your blood at high levels. And if you take an animal and feed it a high fat diet that's not carbohydrate restricted, it's like 30% fat or 30% carbohydrates and high fat too. And you take the blood out and then you centrifuge it and just look at just the liquid portion of the blood, it looks like milk. It looks cloudy, and that's fat in your blood. So if you're giving your body carbohydrates, your body will preferentially, use the carbohydrates over fats, and it will spare the fats essentially. So your triglycerides go up pretty high. When you switch to a low carb or a ketogenic diet, you're literally changing the fuel system in your body to the point where it's suppressing the hormone insulin, and it's facilitating the uptake of fats. It's pulling fats out of your blood, and your muscle and other tissues are using the fats for energy. So triglycerides paradoxically go down with a high-fat ketogenic diet because it's stimulating from a hormonal, metabolic, physiological perspective. It's stimulating the uptake and utilization of those fats for energy. So it essentially clears those fats from your blood, especially if it's if it's calorie restricted, and even if it's not. We typically see the fats go down pretty remarkably. If you're following a carbohydrate-based diet and you calorie restrict, you typically see triglycerides go down, but a lot of people just, find it hard to do that. So paradoxically, blood fats go down significantly when you're eating high fat, which doesn't make sense. Even doctors really don't understand this.
Yeah.
But physiologists kind of do, or people who study the ketogenic diet do, because they see it in the blood work all the time. So when it comes to cholesterol, my cholesterol actually went up when I did the classical ketogenic diet at 90% fat, right? And I followed that for a while. I mean, it went up to the point where my LDL cholesterol was almost 300.
Oh, wow.
And then my HDL started creeping up from about 56 or 60. Now it's up to like 80, close to 90. So the HDL it's a beneficial form of lipoprotein cholesterol. And my LDL went up significantly with the classical ketogenic diet. And then when I switched to more of a modified Atkins or modified ketogenic diet, those numbers gradually went down. And then I switched out a lot of the dairy fat I was eating, a lot of heavy cream and butter, for coconut cream, coconut oil, a lot of avocados, nut butters, things like that, macadamia nut butter. And then my HDL, or my LDL cholesterol, and my LDL particle number, which is also really important, but that involves an NMR. It involves like an expensive blood test. And I did a number of these things and basically showed that with a modified ketogenic diet, all my numbers pretty much went in the right direction.
Nice.
So my triglycerides were very high on a carbohydrate-based diet. They came down a little bit with a classical ketogenic diet, down into the reference range. And then with a modified ketogenic diet, all my biomarkers, including my cholesterol, my good cholesterol went up, my LDL came down, and my C-reactive protein was almost like not even detectable. So, and that's a marker of inflammation. And that's probably your triglycerides and the inflammatory state of your body is probably the two most important blood biomarkers that you can look at. Another thing, of course, is like things like your blood pressure and your heart rate, and heart rate variability, which we're looking at now for different things. So these things generally improve over time, and it's hard to determine if these improvements are simply because we're moderating calories and we're running a mild calorie deficit from a diet that satiates us. I think it corrects a lot of the metabolic issues that we have, the insulin resistance, the resistance to maybe things like leptin and ghrelin and other hormones. I think it corrects a lot of that. And it doesn't have to be the ketogenic diet all the time. So you can have intermittent periods. You could do a couple months of the ketogenic diet in a dieting phase and then transition out to not necessarily a high carb diet, but maybe a low glycemic index diet where you titrate the carbohydrates back in from 50 to 100 to 250. And a lot of bigger guys like yourself, can basically get a lot of the benefits of low carb, just staying at 200 to 250 grams of fibrous carbohydrates a day from things like vegetables and low glycemic
like the zone diet or the Mediterranean diet or something like that.
Yeah, and still keeping fats proportionally high relative to probably what you were doing in the past. I was going back like 20 years ago, when I was in my mid 20s, I would never eat an egg yolk almost. And now it's funny. I'll have like an egg yolk omelet. Like I'll give the whites to my puppies, to the dogs, because they need extra protein. They're growing. And I'll cook up the yolks, and make an omelet out of the yolks, which tastes better anyway, right?
Yeah, way better. Way better. You know what? It's like funny you mentioned that, like when you said that it's hard to tell if the cholesterol improves because of just calorie restricted. When my cholesterol improved, I was still I'm 200. I'm about 200 pounds. Well, I'm cutting right now. I'm in the middle of a cut for a show, so I'm like 195 right now. Yeah. And but when I was doing it, I was about 205, 210, and somewhere around there. But I was getting 5,000 calories a day. like measuring it.
Wow.
Keto calorie, you know, what you would call the modified keto, you know, I would get 70%, maybe 70 to 80% fat, and 20 to about 20, sometimes 10% protein. But my cholesterol still went down with 5,000 calories. And what I noticed is I didn't put on as much fat as I would have when I normally go up that high. Like I was able to stay pretty lean. I did put on some fat, but it wasn't as much. Is that because the insulin was still low?
Yeah, and it might be perceived too that if you're on a carbohydrate-based diet and you're getting surplus calories, you have more of an insulin response to the meals, and that insulin will cause kind of a reuptake of sodium, and you would retain more water, a little bit from the glycogen, but you're just retaining water from the sodium, especially if you're coming out of a ketogenic diet or from low carb. But yeah, so what you just mentioned is pretty common to me. There's a guy in the UK, Mike Dancer, who is an epilepsy patient, and drugs didn't work for him. So he used the ketogenic diet to control his epilepsy, but he also found really dramatic body composition alterations and started competing in bodybuilding after, you know, he was severe epilepsy, you know, which was completely unmanaged with drugs, did the ketogenic diet, had remarkable benefits in the gym and his body composition, and then can kind of step on stage at, you know, and he's completely a drug-free bodybuilder, tall guy too. He's like 6'3". So you can look up Mike Dancer. Actually, he was on bodybuilding.com. They did a thing on him.
I'll check that out.
You know, it talked about his story from battling, you know, severe seizures to embracing the ketogenic diet. He did a modified Atkins diet and the effects that it had on managing his epilepsy and his body composition changes to it.
You did a study. I'm sorry. No, go ahead. Continue. I'm sorry.
I was kind of throwing out there that his fat consumption was something like 300 to even upwards of 400 grams per day of fat. And maybe like your scenario too, he was just burning through it. Like he was able to add muscle on that, but also if he, you know, it's easy to decrease your calories when you're consuming that much fat per day. So he just kind of goes down from 350 grams of fat a day to 250 grams of fat a day. And since your body is adapted to burning fat, it's going to quickly pull fat from your adipose stores. And like you're already, your body's fat adapted and you're feeding it tons of fat. So it's accustomed to using that energy, that fatty acids as a fuel source. So simply, you know, titrating the fat back down, that's going to start liberating a lot of fat from adipose storage, and you'll start seeing some pretty dramatic fat loss effects. That's
been my experience because I'm told you I'm cutting for an event, and I have my calories at exactly like I'm weighing stuff exactly 2,500 calories. First of all, if I would have doing that on just, you know, a regular diet, just if it fits your macros, would feel awful to me, you know, but I feel fine on keto. I have more energy, and I know you did a study. I wonder if you can tell us about that, where you took some you took some keto athletes, you know, guys who've been training, well-trained athletes, and some other guys who were well-trained. You had them on a Western diet. You have other guys on the modified keto, you know, 70%, 75% fat. What were the results? Because this goes against everything that I've learned up until this point. I thought it was all calories in, calories out, but now I'm seeing that the macros and the hormones play a big role. Can you tell them about that study a little bit? Because it was remarkable.
Sure. That was a ketogenic diet, but a modified form of it with more liberal protein, anywhere between 20 to 30, about 25% protein. And the subjects were all trained fairly advanced in regards to they could, you know, squat and bench press X amount of their body weight. So they fit into, you know, a situation where they've been training a couple years. And it's typically hard to get really robust effects, you know, in guys that have trained this way.
Yeah.
So we had a group that was eating a standard Western diet kind of approach, and then guys that were on this modified Atkins, modified ketogenic diet. So what we demonstrated was that you can gain muscle on a ketogenic diet. So that's what we wanted to. So we kept the calories coming in, and we encouraged them to use things like medium chain triglyceride fats, What we did, which a lot of studies maybe in the past did not do, was measured blood ketone levels. And the average ketone level, you had to have elevated ketone levels to be in the study. Otherwise, you were taken out of the study because it showed that you were, not necessarily, probably not adhering to the diet, or just could not get into a state of ketosis. So the Western diet group and the ketogenic diet group gained muscle. A fairly significant amount, 2 to 3 kilograms of muscle, like over time, or which was pretty significant. The main effects, so it demonstrated that you can gain muscle and strength on a ketogenic diet, but it also demonstrated that you had greater fat loss on the ketogenic diet than in the Western diet. So the body composition changes where the ketogenic diet did not gain more muscle, but they were able to reduce their body fat to a greater percentage than the Western diet group. And they were able to increase their strength proportional to the Western diet. So it answered this question that I often get a lot, is that can you gain muscle and strength on a ketogenic diet? And you can, if the training protocol is set up correctly, and you have the guys really coming in there and training hard and doing the major compound movements and adhering to a ketogenic diet that's not significantly calorie restricted. So a lot of the situation is usually such in the fitness industry, when people go on a ketogenic diet, they restrict their calories. So they're jumping into a state of ketosis and significantly restricting calories at the same time. And you're probably going to start breaking down and liberating a lot of muscle, like gluconeogenic amino acids that are in your protein stores, are really your skeletal muscle. So you're going to, probably break down protein initially, because your body goes through the initial stress of ketosis. It's a stress to your body. So what I say to tell people to do is transition into a ketogenic diet, but stay eucaloric. So maintain the same amount of calories, transition into a ketogenic diet, hold that for a period of time, get your body adapted and feeling good, and then start titrating the calories back down.
That's the same thing. Spike
it up once or twice a week to keep your metabolism, to prevent it from decreasing over time. What worked good for me was, if I had 2 heavy workouts during a week, like if it legs or back, and then I would add not a cheat day, but a refeed day, where I would just eat more of the same foods, and I would increase my calories 500 to sometimes 1,000 on those days that I did, heavy workouts. And that those periodic spikes in calories every, couple days can help keep your metabolism revved up.
Oh, so you do it every couple of days. See, I was thinking maybe like every once a week or every 2 weeks, but you think every couple of days is good.
Yeah, but nothing extreme. It's like 500 extra calories on a Wednesday because you did legs that day, or because you did back that day. So and those exercises typically put you at more of a calorie deficit. So it's almost like you're getting extra calories in, but you're also
burning more.
Putting calories into your system because you've utilized more.
Got it. I really think when people start the ketogenic diet, they should start at, like you said, start at maintenance, because now you have to adapt to ketosis and you have to adapt to caloric restriction. And sometimes it's too difficult. Sometimes people want to do that. They want to start out of nowhere. They've been eating crazy for years. They want to start ketosis, caloric restriction, and intermittent fasting. I'm like, whoa, that's 3 different things that you have to adjust to at once. I think I had to stop intermittent fasting for a while, because I was doing a 16-hour fast for years, and it to great results. But when I started the keto, I had to stop fasting. I just wanted to get adjusted to that. Then I was able to incorporate that in. I think once you do it, you start to feel good, and that will mitigate a lot of the keto flu that everyone's scared of. Are there any other ways to not get the flu, like you were talking about?
I think exogenous ketones too, are using foods that can promote your body to make more ketones, like coconut oil, medium chain triglycerides, MCT oil. I use like an MCT powder that, I'll put in my coffee and things like that. And that bumps up your ketone levels and sends ketones to your brain, so you feel better. one person emailed me. It's like they did what you just said. They did a shotgun approach. So they went from, a standard like high carb diet to a calorie restricted ketogenic diet and a more aggressive training protocol with like 2 or 3 sessions of high interval or high intensity interval training.
Yeah. It's too much at once.
I would say, yeah, add variables, very slowly, and even something like high intensity interval training, which is really going to kind of suck up your glycogen, to add like 1 session a week. And then as you're working towards your goal, this person had like 12 to 14 weeks to prepare for a contest, to just add sessions in, hold that 1 session a week for 2 weeks and then add 2 sessions and then maybe work up 2 or 3 sessions per week maximum. But don't jump into a calorie restricted ketogenic diet scenario with 3 sessions of high intensity interval training. So this is where it takes, people need to be talking to a sensible coach, and a lot of coaches maybe even advocate these approches.
Now you cannot jump it right into it. I mean, I understand you get enthusiasm, you want to, but it's too much. What else I've noticed is salt. Actually, for a lot of people, like getting more sodium actually helps mitigate a lot of these keto flu symptoms. Have you noticed that as well? Has that been the case?
Yeah, absolutely. So salting your food, if you're going on a ketogenic diet, I probably eat more vegetables on a ketogenic diet now than I did on a high carb diet, which was like mostly pasta, breads, and potatoes and stuff. So for your salad, for example, liberally put on the salt. Liberally, if I had broccoli last night, I put quite a bit of salt on it, and the foods that you eat, and get fluids. So one of the side effects of the ketogenic diet that comes up in the literature is kidney stones. And kids that follow the diet for epilepsy, probably the most serious side effect would be kidney stones. But when you add potassium in a supplement, if you give these kids potassium citrate and then study them over a decade, there's no higher incidence of kidney stones. And if you keep them adequately hydrated too, but just simply adding some magnesium or some potassium, which can offset some of the acidosis that you get initially, especially with this really restrictive ketogenic diet. So I encourage people to take a mineral supplement. I use potassium supplement. That's actually part of a product that I use. There's different like ketone products that I use. Ketogenic Prime is one. I use a couple others, and they have, a pretty significant amount of, like, this has 1,020 milligrams of potassium. So instead of, and it has, 310 milligrams of magnesium. So instead of having to buy the supplements, some of the ketone products on the market actually, because they're combined with the ketone, they're giving a lot of the mineral too. So, and you tend to feel better. So not only are you giving your body ketones, which helps you transition into that state of ketosis without feeling the keto flu, but you're also delivering a lot of minerals at the same time, which may be depleted when you start the ketogenic diet. So that's kind of the benefits of these ketone supplements. They make it really easy for people to start the ketogenic diet, and I like to use it sometimes during intermittent fasting. Like, are
you still considered fasting if you take if you take in some of this stuff? Are you still considered fasting?
Well, I call it a modified intermittent fasting.
Okay.
If I was taking a packet of this, but what I do, I split it. So I'll take half a packet. I'll fast. Like, I'll do a 20-hour fast and maybe 4 hours of eating when I get home from like 10 p.m. or 6 to 10 p.m. or something like that.
That's intense.
And it's kind of intense. But during the day, it's a lot less intense if I just take a packet, of this, and it has some other things in it, like acetyl-L-carnitine and alpha-GPC, like some things that kind of I would want to take anyway. So it eliminates some of the supplements that I kind of was on my shelf anyway. And I definitely feel the boost from it, and I feel the energy from it, and it makes intermittent fasting a lot more enjoyable for me, because I like the kind of the feeling of drinking something that kind of tastes good and is giving my body a mineral. And if you were to look at my blood, it would actually look that I'm more, you'd have the perception that I'm actually more in a fasted state than I would otherwise would be if I didn't take the ketone supplement. And what I mean by that is that my glucose levels drop a little bit when I take these supplements, and my ketone levels go up a little bit. So it's almost facilitating or augmenting some of these biomarkers that are reflective or indicative of being in a fasted state. We know that we gain a lot of benefits from fasting by, reducing glucose and probably more importantly, elevating ketones. So our colleagues at Yale University, Dr. Deep Dixit, showed that a lot of the benefits of intermittent fasting were from beta hydroxybutyrate.
Right,
So
because when you're in a fasted state, you start producing ketones. Right.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So beta hydroxybutyrate is elevated. We know that has an anti-inflammatory effect. It impacts gene expression and has, a lot of beneficial effects. And it's further lowering glucose. So it's actually training our brains and our body to get to function and be optimized in a low glucose state, a mild hypoglycemic state. And by keeping glucose low, that's even facilitating more fat burning, right? And I'm looking at the effect of, consuming large amounts of exogenous ketones on insulin. So the test that I'm doing right now is actually a half a dose of a ketone supplement does not produce a rise in insulin. But I think if I take 2 of these at one time, it's going to elevate insulin. And that has been a question probably that I get more than anything else. Do these ketone supplements elevate insulin? And I'll tell you that a half a packet doesn't. So now I'm doing some blood work to see how much exogenous ketones do I have to consume to where I'm bumping up insulin, which may be shutting off fat burning.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. I'm sorry to cut you off, man. I just got excited.
That's a big question. Yeah.
From a fat burning perspective, body composition, if I just want to burn fat, if I take exogenous ketones, am I burning less? Because in my mind, ketones are energy. And if I'm getting more energy, then my body's not using my own fat as energy. That's my hypothesis. Am I right or wrong? Or what's your take?
So you're putting energy into the system. Whenever you put energy into a system, right, you are typically going to reduce the amount of energy that you're pulling from your stores, whether that be glycogen or fatty acids from adipose. So in theory, you could be, if you consume a lot of it, but I think you have to view it from a kind of a more complicated perspective. We know that ketones can enhance insulin sensitivity and can enhance mitochondrial function and many other things that could, when done over time, facilitate and even augment the fat burning capacity of your body. So I think kind of what's important is that, there's a qualitative and a quantitative kind of thing to discuss here, but I think if you consume ketone supplements in small amounts, and a lot of times these packets have a lot more than you need in it. I can kind of think they're overdosed to get your ketones above 1 or whatever. If you consume just small amounts of it, your body, especially when you're in a dieting state, your body's so sensitive to what you give it, right? So I know immediately when I consume half of a serving of a ketone supplement, I feel the energy and I can kind of focus, and I get 2 to 3 to 4 hours of really intense work done. And then I'll consume the other half of the packet or dose and still continue that. And by virtue of blood work that I've done, looking at insulin, looking at blood ketones, looking at we do a whole metabolic profile kit. There's no indication that I'm decreasing fat burning from it significantly in any regard, especially if you maybe combine it with some stimulants, like this one has green tea or some caffeine, and you hit an espresso around that time. So there may be some synergy too of combining. So what we're looking at now, and some publications come out, if you combine ketones with caffeine, the caffeine can mobilize more fat from adipose, and that fat goes to your liver and converts it to ketones. So what we see is that you can actually further elevate ketone levels when you give a dose of a stimulant like caffeine. And of course, you want to be moderate. Caffeine should not be consumed more than 500 milligrams per day, something like that. But you don't need a lot, maybe
I'd probably beat that. I'd probably beat that each day. Really? I'm gonna be honest.
600 milligrams a day is actually used in some of the studies that show an optimal, physiological response. So you could do that, yeah. And studies come out. One just came out with coffee, and was saying the optimal dose is like 6 strong cups a day for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and things like that. And there's a researcher here, a very esteemed researcher, that has done a lot of work on coffee, caffeinated coffee, and Alzheimer's, and showed some pretty significant results with that. So, and I think of coffee as a health food. I mean,
Yeah,
the color of coffee, that's all, that's a wide spectrum of antioxidant compounds. So we're probably getting more antioxidants and things from coffee than we are from our diet.
Yeah,
actually.
people, it's just not marketed like that. For whatever reason, they don't market like that.
Yeah.
It's like, it has more antioxidants than almost any other drink, right?
A lot. Yeah, it's even beneficial for your liver too. A lot of people are thinking, well, if you're giving your liver all these, caffeine and stimulants and things like that, the compounds in coffee are really like beneficial for your liver. I mean, there's studies done showing, better liver health and better, less liver cancer, things like that when you're drinking coffee. So there's a lot of benefits, but there's a dose response. And in some people, my 23andMe data, my genetic data shows that I'm a very fast metabolizer of caffeine. So I can kind of, drink 4 or 5, even up to 6 cups a day and be fine. Like I metabolize it really fast. So
now you're speaking my language. Okay, so can I just switching gears a little bit. Is the ketogenic diet gonna give me cancer? This is what everyone keeps telling me, Doc. Everyone tells me I'm gonna get cancer for this. It's gonna give me cancer. That's I get millions of comments. People making 45-minute YouTube videos about me saying that I'm recommending the keto diet and everyone's going to get cancer. Is that true, Doc? Am I giving people cancer?
No, well, I would like to see the data on that. Actually, so, I mean, it's really common sense and it's basic metabolic physiology. So there's a lot of armchair scientists out there who don't actually they don't do cancer research. They don't do research on the ketogenic diet.
You do actually do cancer research. You actually, there's like tumors in the other room that you're studying, right?
Yeah. And we have, I have, 2, presidential fellows. I have a future Marshall scholar, working on the cancer project. Like the students that I have are like the top 1% of the students working on these projects. There's a little bit of, let me take a step back. So any diet that really facilitates, calorie restriction and improvement of metabolic biomarkers is going to, simply by virtue of suppressing insulin signaling and IGF-1, if you have cancer, that cancer is going to grow far less. I mean, we know that tumor growth and proliferation is driven to a large extent, about 80, probably 90% of tumors are driven through glycolytic pathways that are augmented and enhanced through glucose uptake. Also, glutamine can be used as fuel. And it's driven to a large part by insulin IGF-1 signaling. So we know the ketogenic diet, you actually make ketones by virtue of suppressing insulin signaling. So it's kind of a no-brainer that it would work to, at the very least, slow cancer growth. So it's taking the foot off the gas pedal, essentially, of cancer growth. So there's some debate out there whether certain types of cancer cells can use ketones as an energy source. So I would say that may be possible. I haven't seen like really convincing data that tumors grow by using ketones as an energy source. I think maybe some of the growth, the biomass of the tumor may incorporate ketones into lipids as they grow, but that would be such a small percentage relative to incorporation of glucose or incorporation of things like alanine and glutamine and things like that. There's a lot of nuances that a lot of people just don't understand. But what we do understand, when you do a meta-analysis of all the animal data, you go on PubMed and look at all the animal data, which we've done this in all the human, clinical trials, and it's only pilot trials at this point. We have we've submitted a proposal for a very large, study to be done on brain tumors, for the NIH, and hopefully that's being reviewed now. And the NIH and the National Cancer Institute is actually becoming more interested in funding the ketogenic diet as a therapy.
Really, the Cancer Institute is going to be is interested in funding the ketogenic diet as a therapy.
Absolutely. So that's why our lab partnered with the Moffitt Cancer Institute to write a National Cancer Institute grant, which is an R01 grant or a P01 grant. And these are the biggest grants that, NIH and NCI offer. And they did it because they are looking to utilize the ketogenic diet specifically not as a standalone approach to cancer, but as an adjuvant to the standard of care. So this idea of taking the foot off the gas pedal of cancer growth, right? So you weaken the cancer, and then you also can decrease the side effects of some of the chemo and radiation. So you get a person into a state of nutritional ketosis, you elevate ketone levels to a small to moderate degree, and most importantly, suppress insulin and insulin signaling and lower glucose, right? No glucose spikes and insulin spikes. And in that state, that makes a large majority of cancer cells vulnerable to other modalities like radiation and chemo, right? It will sensitize that. So it causes, and certain drugs do this too, and we're studying various drugs like metformin and dichloroacetate and 2GG, which is like glucose, but the cells can't use it. These things cause an energetic crisis in the cancer cells, right? Like the ketogenic diet limits fuel supply and growth factor signaling to the cancer cells. So it promotes a mild energetic crisis that makes it vulnerable to things that can, kill the cancer cells through an oxidative stress mechanism. So it actually, if you decrease energy to cancer cells, they have an endogenous antioxidant pathway that requires a lot of energy. So it reduces the cell's ability to defend itself. And then you kind of come in here or introduce into the patient various modalities like chemotherapy drugs or at a lower dose, or even immune-based drugs and even radiation. You can use it as a lower dose and it has a stronger effect. So that's the idea. So this has been, some proof of concept studies have been done. My colleague at Adrian Scheck at Barrow Neurological Institute and a number of colleagues have done studies showing, a variety of animal models to show that the ketogenic diet can be effective as a standalone for really advanced cancers and kind of extend animal life. But I think more importantly at this point, we want to get it into clinical trials as an adjuvant. So something that can, enhance the standard of care. We know the standard of care therapies don't work for things like brain tumors, glioblastoma. They offer minimal effect. Advanced metastatic cancer, it offers little or no effect. So it creates a scenario where the standard of care doesn't work, but maybe if we use an adjuvant, we can improve the efficacy of the standard of care, for these super aggressive, fast-growing tumors. And the ketogenic diet, is just one small piece of a bigger thing that we're looking at. So we're looking at, not just the ketogenic diet as like this thing in a box, but, dozens of variations of the ketogenic diet and different types of fats and different types of probiotic fiber, which could enhance the gut microbiome, and anti-inflammatory fats and different types of proteins, and then ketone supplements too can be incorporated into the ketogenic diet to further elevate ketones and lower blood glucose, which we know can have a significant impact on the cancer. So we're approaching it from that way, and then looking at a whole toolbox of drugs and a whole toolbox of other compounds that will work with the diet to create like a more comprehensive approach that's less toxic, but that can also work with various cytotoxic chemotherapy and radiation protocols that are already out there. So from our perspective, it's really important just to get it in the clinic first. And if you look at clinicaltrials.gov, when I got into this, there was no ketogenic diet that were registered, ketogenic diet trials online, but now you see a dozen or more ketogenic diet clinical trials that are registered clinical trials that are being conducted. The same with metformin. That's a drug that we study. I don't think there was any studies going on, 10 years ago with metformin in cancer. And now there's something like 180, or more clinical trials.
And you pioneered this, a little bit.
Well, I didn't pioneer it. Like, other people were studying this, but we studied it in our model, and now we're moving to studying it in a variety of different models to find out what types of cancer, does this work best for. So we tend to focus on cancers that are highly resistant to the standard of care, different types of brain tumors and metastatic cancer, whereas, other cancers like blood cancers, leukemia or lymphoma, are highly responsive to existing, standard of care, to chemo. So you would be crazy not to do the standard of care in that way, but also we would like to look at enhancing the standard of care for those types of cancers, because I've had people with multiple myelomas to leukemias to testicular cancer use the ketogenic diet, and they had no side effects when they went through their chemo. They really felt, they did the ketogenic diet. Some of them fasted, going up to getting their chemo infusions, and they had a dramatic response, and then, no side effects on top of that, which is uncharacteristic.
That's crazy.
So we think, there's application there too.
Does, now from my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, because you actually are a legit cancer researcher. For the most part, cancer cells can't live off glucose. And I'm saying they live off glucose. They can't live off ketones. And is that one of the reasons why cancer cells are more susceptible to treatment when you're in a ketogenic state? Is that what you were saying, or do I have it wrong?
I think the cells that we study, I got interested. I saw the first paper I saw on this was Dr. Skinner's group at University of Florida, where they looked at neuroblastoma cells. And the neuroblastoma cells could not survive in the presence of ketones if you subtracted glucose from the media, whereas other cells did. So I found that interesting. And the more I studied it, we were studying a cell type, a U87 glioblastoma cell. I think it comes from like a 44-year-old glioblastoma patient. And these were some of the first cells I worked with back in 2005, I believe. And I found that just simply adding ketones to the culture media, even in the presence of glucose, reduced their proliferation and also increased the amount of dead cells that I saw. So this motivated me to figure out why this was happening. And I contacted people like Thomas Seyfried from Boston College. I contacted a whole list of people and discussed, why this was happening. There are various enzymes that tumors have. One is succinyl-CoA transferase, which is either absent or deficient in the large majority of cancer cells. And the absence of that enzyme prevents the cancer cell from utilizing glucose as an energy source, or from utilizing ketones rather, as an energy source, and to preferentially use glucose in hyperactivated glycolytic pathways, which there's a greater, activity and amount of things like hexokinase and hexokinase 2, which is an enzyme that allows the cancer cells to use glucose at rates that are up to 200 times higher than normal cells. So the cancer cell, a normal cell, when it transitions into a cancer cell, part of that transition and the oncogenic the activation of these cancer genes is to increase the sugar pathways, the glycolytic pathways. And that does a number of things. It allows the cell to survive in a low oxygen, a hypoxic environment. And it also directs various energy intermediates into biosynthetic pathways for the expanding biomass of the tumor. And as the tumor grows, the blood vessels can't supply enough oxygen to it, so it becomes hypoxic. It becomes even lower in oxygen as the tumor grows. And these glycolytic pathways, which we call in upregulation as the Warburg effect, allows that tumor, it's an advantage. It allows that tumor to survive in low oxygen and to expand the growing biomass and to allow proliferation under conditions that would otherwise not happen, right? And so if you take, the more aggressive these cancer cells are, the less capacity they typically have to use ketones as an energy source. So there's some indication that some of the ketone molecules can be used into the biosynthetic pathways, but far less than things like amino acids. So they're basically marginalized in a way in using these ketones as an energy source. So we studied a variety of different cell lines from U87 to these VMM3 cell lines to C6 and other different cancer cell lines. Now we're going to study, lung and pancreatic and breast cancer cell lines to determine specifically what types of cancer cells are most sensitive to, or have the ability to use ketones as an energy source. That's one question. And are most sensitive to glucose and insulin suppression, right? So which creates this energetic crisis that makes them vulnerable to the many other modalities we're working on. So the ketogenic diet is just like one piece of a puzzle that, has 20 or 30 different components to it. It tends to be the one that's kind of discussed quite frequently or debated online. And typically, always look at the credentials of the people who are arguing with you. Like, for one thing, are they cancer researchers that have, grants that are studying this? Do they have a lab? Can you go on PubMed and find their publications? Because there's many, many nuances to studying this.
So if you're just some guy on the internet,
animal model.
If you're just some guy on the internet, you probably shouldn't take advice from me. You should probably go to the actual researcher. Is that
go to PubMed. So if you do go to PubMed, what you find is about anywhere from about 80% of the studies show a positive effect of the ketogenic diet. So these, and 20% of the studies are the ones kind of that we're focusing on. So why did the ketogenic diet not work? Maybe they were consuming surplus calories. So my colleague, who is actually a major proponent of this diet for cancer research, he published a study in a CT2A model of brain tumors. His name is Thomas Seyfried from Boston College. He showed that if you gave the ketogenic diet in the form of a food supplement called KetoCal, which is a ketogenic kind of shake that you can drink for kids, and you give it to the animals ad libitum, and you implanted cancer cells intracranially into the mice, and then they ate the diet ad libitum, so as freely as they like, the tumors grew faster on this ketogenic diet. That the particular ketogenic diet was sweetened, so they probably ate surplus amount of calories, and that actually fueled the cancer growth. So he's actually published studies showing the ketogenic diet can actually cause tumors to grow faster. But when you calorie restricted that ketogenic diet, which the ketogenic diet tends to, work best when it's calorie restricted, he found a remarkable decrease in the tumor growth relative even to a normal carbohydrate-based diet that was calorie restricted. So you get this idea, that if you are introducing excess calories into a system, those energy substrates, metabolites will find their way into the system and contribute to the expanding biomass of the tumor through energetically, driving the tumor, or from anabolically increasing just a building block of that tumor. So that's why we actually study things that are not calorie restricted, but when we implement the ketogenic diet, even in our rodent models, and even if we use ketone supplements, we find that they calorie restrict just like a perfect amount. It almost corrects their overeating activities, and they calorie restrict about to the point where their body weight comes down about 5 to 15, on average about 10%. And that's when you get a lot of these health benefits. Because if you calorie restrict too much, it can impair the immune system, and you don't want to do that to a cancer patient or the lab rats and animals that we study. So there's a lot of the benefits from the ketogenic diet. Some of the benefits are from calorie restricting, but even if you don't restrict calories, at least in our model systems, maybe not all model systems, if you if you don't restrict calories, you may have little or no impact on tumor growth. And I think some of the studies that are published show that. Say, the ketogenic diet does not, have any effect on this tumor or can make this tumor grow faster, which my colleague, Tom Seyfried, showed that it can speed tumor growth in a brain cancer model. That's a pretty common model, standard model. It can actually increase tumor growth if the calories are not restricted. So there's a lot of nuances that, if you're not in the lab, if you're not, and not, I'm at the level now where I'm not always in the lab a lot. I'm like writing grants, but I do pop in the lab and we have lab meetings, and I just kind of, and a lot of these issues kind of come out that you have many different caveats to various model systems in vitro and in vivo, in petri dish and in animal models, that need to be understood to interpret the data. Because it's easy to go on PubMed and cherry pick out a couple studies and say, look, in this model system, the tumor cells grew faster, but you really have to study that model system to understand. There's a lot of nuances. I could probably take our model systems and formulate some kind of ketogenic diet to make the tumors grow really fast and to kill the animal faster, and I could probably do that with a ketogenic diet if I formulate it in the right way. So these are some things. So we like to kill
people if they drink enough water, right? Like anything in excess can be like, deadly, right? So you got, so what you're saying is anything that's like, if you can do anything extreme and it can be bad, right? Like you got to like really look at like how it's administered.
Yeah, and I think it's important to acknowledge that, there's lots of hard data out there showing that hyperglycemia, which from excess calorie intake, there's a greater percentage of people getting cancer if they don't have their type 2 diabetes under control. So that's basically driving. We do quite a bit of work. We've done work with metformin, and longtime users of metformin are like 60% less likely to get pancreatic cancer. So you're targeting, some of the pathways that we're actually hitting with the ketogenic diet. So it mimics some of those pathways. But what we really need to do, there's a lot of unanswered questions still. The balance of the data, very, very conservatively, 70% of the data is positive. It's more like about 80%, I think, if you do a meta-analysis of the human and animal studies. But we're interested in understanding, why some studies didn't work, and also analyzing the studies that did work and to make them work better. And also to understand what types of cancer cells the ketogenic diet, which is one component of many things that need to be integrated, to understand why certain types of cancers are more responsive to low glucose and high ketones. I mean, the low glucose and, you suppress the hormone insulin. That's, all cancer researchers know that insulin pathways drive tumor growth and proliferation. And the ketogenic diet, by virtue of suppressing insulin signaling, that's how you make ketones. So, it kind of makes sense that it should slow. Yeah, well, that's the next.
I don't know if you can say that like legally, but like, would you? If I'm on a ketogenic diet, would you believe that I probably I'm less likely to get certain cancers?
For the majority of cancers, I would say yes. And I think, and it's not probably due to the things that you may, traditionally think the reasons why. It may not be due to suppression of insulin signal. I think it has a lot to do with just the lower inflammatory state of your body. And my inflammatory markers are running about half to a quarter of what they did when I was on a carbohydrate-based diet.
That's intense, like
low inflammation. Yeah. So many of these inflammatory cytokines are what I would call, oncometabolites and oncomolecules, where they can activate various oncogenes. So they actually damage normal cells in a way and can activate gene expression that can trigger the transition of a normal cell to a cancer cell. We know this. So decreasing inflammation, managing and decreasing oxidative stress, which is intimately linked to inflammation, and keeping the body in what I call a metabolic, enhancing metabolic health by reducing triglycerides, decreasing glucose and glucose spikes, and suppressing insulin signaling. All these things I just mentioned are things that occur on a well-balanced, well-formulated ketogenic diet, or even just carbohydrate restriction. And these are all benefits that will have long-term consequences, beneficial consequences to the person that follows it.
In a variety of ways, right? Not just cancer, like keeping your inflammation low. Is that why your skin is so clear, Doc? Like, 'cause I've noticed my skin cleared up like crazy.
Yeah.
As soon as is it because of the low inflammation?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. I do.
Thank you, Doc. I appreciate that.
No, you have super clear skin. Yeah, I was at the beach yesterday, so I got a little bit of sunburn actually. But I get quite a bit of emails from people who have, gotten less acne. So some people get adult acne and they get less acne. So actually, I had acne when I was younger. I actually took a drug, Accutane, for a short amount of time. I took like a half dose and it cleared up. When your body, I was like 18 or 19 going through like some hormonal things when my puberty kind of kicked in late. And it made me think, at the time, I grew up in an Italian family. I was eating huge plates of pasta, pancakes every morning, things like that. So it makes me think, what would my body have done if I followed this low carb or ketogenic? But I did have eczema. So eczema is an inflammatory condition that makes your skin kind of dry and itchy, to the point where I was on drugs, as a little kid and growing up. And since I've been on the ketogenic diet, I've had zero eczema. So it completely went away. And eczema is an autoimmune, like your body's reacting to foreign molecules, and your skin is your biggest organ, and it's kind of reflective of your overall health and also like your general immune system and things like that. So, I think it would have been good to do like a complete cytokine profile before and after, like when I was having eczema. But it works remarkably well for a number of skin conditions.
Yeah, I mean, I just noticed it in like a lot of my clients, like especially the younger guys, in their teens, they're going. It's because it's something people struggle with, and it like hurts their confidence, and then they start cutting carbs, going on more of a keto diet, even if they don't go all the way keto, right? Like it seems like that inflammation, it seems like their skin just clears up. I've noticed it.
And I think it has to do a lot with growth factors like insulin, IGF-1 axis, and growth factors. Because when we're younger and we tend to be most prone to getting acne, like our insulin sensitivity and IGF-1 levels and various hormones are kind of off the charts, right? And I think the ketogenic diet helps to moderate that. And that's why it works really well. And I had an interview just the other day about polycystic ovary syndrome, which is kind of a dysregulation of sex hormones in women that can also contribute to acne. And a ketogenic diet is a legitimate, PubMed searchable therapy for PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, and it helps to normalize and moderate their hormone levels.
Yeah, man.
Have that.
I want to switch gears for one second, man, because this is all amazing. Because since I got you here, I have like so much stuff I want to ask you. Why do I feel like I can concentrate better and I have like more energy? I guess I have more ketones. I know that, but like I feel like I'm more focused. And this is what a lot of the guys in the business world, like I got friends who, like I'm in New York, I have friends on Wall Street who started doing this. They didn't care about it. Look, they just want to focus, right? Because if they can perform this much better, that's millions of dollars. Or like a lot of entrepreneurs, Silicon Valley, a lot of these guys are on this. How does this help with actually like focusing and cognition? How does that keep it?
It's funny you mentioned that, because I get a disproportionate amount of CEO type people, like Uber, successful business people, even like billionaire people that are following this diet, and many of them are like, they want to coach, but I don't really do that sort of thing.
Send them to me, man. Send them to me. So, like all the billionaires, Dom, all the billionaires, send them to me. I'll give you a cut. It'll be a nice system.
Yeah. It's like, well, I have actually, just go to my website and I have really good consultants on there that
Oh,
do
nice.
this for a living. They have, hundreds of clients, so they're really skilled at it.
Oh,
And
so what's
there's
that website again, real quick, just so we don't forget?
ketonutrition.org.
Got
And
it.
if you click on resources, I'm building that list. There's about a dozen, keto diet consultants on there.
Nice.
So yeah, without a doubt, being in a state of nutritional ketosis makes you more kind of even keel and being able to focus more. If you have attention deficit disorders, like if you can't focus, continuously, the keto, I typically choose to write a lot of my grants and manuscripts and things like that in a state of deep ketosis, because I just get a whole lot of work done. And I don't get hungry. So a lot of times, when you're working, you just get into that groove. If you're on a carbohydrate-based diet, you get into that groove where you're really focusing and getting a lot of, mental work done or work on a manuscript. And then, damn, you get hungry. And it's like, man, I can't concentrate and I'm stuck here. Well, on a ketogenic diet, like I've periods of time where I put in 8 to 10 to maybe even 12 hours of continuous work on a manuscript or a grant where I've just nailed it out. And I was only able to do that and basically not stop because, I was pretty deep into nutritional ketosis. So I will use it for that purpose. I will use it for like writing and things like that.
What do your ketone levels have to be to get that kind of focus? Because I've been there too, but like, is there a level? Like, do I have to be at 3?
Actually, I feel best. So what I did initially is instead of, measuring what I did was I would sense when I felt the best, like when do I feel best? When do I feel most lucid? And then take note when I ate last and what my glucose levels were and what my ketone levels were. So instead of like measuring myself and then writing down how I felt, I would assess how I felt first. And when do I feel optimized? And then I would take a metabolic snapshot of that period of time. And then I can kind of reverse sort of do it and basically do ways to achieve that metabolic state where I had, really good fuel flow to my brain and my mood and everything and my energy was balanced. And I think it has a lot to do from a standpoint of like the CEO where he needs to be kind of on point all the time, or from an academic point of view where I need a block of 4 to 5 hours where I can't get hungry, where I just need to focus on getting this manuscript done because the deadline's, the next day, to be able to do the things even the day prior to set your body up. So sometimes I'll eat a little bit more the day before where I know, okay, man, I got to sit down at my desk and basically put a sign on my door, in a meeting or don't bother me and just kind of work on this and just get this nailed out this day. But I find everybody's a little bit different, but I find that, ketones and caffeine, and I use caffeine in moderation. Like I get a nice buzz off about 50 to like 100 milligrams, where if I slam a big Starbucks coffee, like in the middle of a thought process, I'll just start to get anxious and it has a negative effect on me. So I use it in like small doses to give me, and I try not to overuse it. And then I don't consume caffeine after like 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. or something like that, because I think it disrupts my sleep if I drink, a cup around dinner time or something like that. So I'm very kind of measured and kind of metered in my approach to using things. And
but caffeine's one of the most popular, like one of the most effective nootropics as well, right?
It is, and I think it combines well with a lot of things, and I think it combines particularly well with ketones, even exogenous ketones. So like I said, sometimes I'll use some of the ketone supplements too, and I will get my most productive runs of writing when I'm consuming small amounts of those things. And my to get back to your question, my ketones typically run about 1 to 2 millimolar on the blood meter, and that's when I feel best. And sometimes it can get up to the 3, like this weekend, actually, it was like 3.7 or something. And I was doing some work, which was, I didn't even know it was that high. But I actually got a lot of work done. I had a bunch of deadlines, this weekend. And so it varies, but I think most important is just being in a mild state of ketosis can can kind of sustain your mood and your energy levels and make you more lucid to the point where you can focus on the task at hand
and get more done. Like this is actually like me and like a lot of my business partners, you know, I have my own fitness company, and like that's the main reason that, I mean, like we like being ripped. We like, you know, you know, cancer prevention and blood pressure, all that's cool, but we can work, and because we're like workaholics, and it's this state, like I really can't explain it to, and you know, any diet to get you ripped, but you won't get this feeling, you know, that we're talking about from other stuff.
Yeah. And, you know, I was pretty anti-ketogenic diet for a long time. It just seemed like a radical approach to me. I didn't really understand it. And then, you know, my research path went down the path of studying seizures, and that occur as a limitation to Navy SEAL diving. And I was, you know, looking at drugs, and they didn't really seem like a feasible option. So when I discovered that this diet, I was like, wow, I could use, because I studied nutrition as an undergrad, I can kind of come full circle and apply nutrition to my neuroscience and, you know, background, and actually and get into studying nutrition as a metabolic based approach, you know, to managing these seizures. So it became really exciting to me. But prior to that, I always felt like the ketogenic diet was the fastest way to get small. And
that's what I thought. Because you're a big guy. You're bigger than me. Like you're like 200 some pounds. I've heard you deadlift like 600 pounds or something like that. Something crazy like that.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the core of, you know, I like to lift heavy. I did, you know, I was on a project, NASA's NASA Extreme Environment Mission Operations, where astronauts go down in the ocean and have to spend time, you know, and living in saturation. And I got my body weight down for that. And it was so easy to do on a ketogenic diet. So, and I felt like, you know, for astronauts, usually you want to kind of, you know, be a little bit lighter in body. And I felt, you know, I could be better, more from a utilitarian point of view. It was better for me to get my body weight down. So it was June 27th when I came out of the NASA NEMO environment, I weighed 207, which was the lowest, you know, I had ever been, I think since like high school. Really? And then ever since the end of June, I've gained 1 pound per week, you know, since then. And now I'm almost just about back to 220. And I did it, you know, just simply adding in ketogenic foods, like adding in an extra egg, you know, this week. Okay, next week I'm going to add, you know, a little bit, you know, one can of sardines and things like that. And I keep like little notes on that. It's not super controlled because I kind of know my body now, like you do. But it was very easy to gradually gain that weight back and just try to get in the gym a little bit more and do the heavy compound movements. Yeah, but I find that, and because bigger guys have they have to eat constantly. I remember, you know, I was just continually shoveling food in my mouth all the time to maintain, we're older. Like 240, 250. Yeah. But now I find it so liberating. Like I don't have to carry food around with me. I can eat, you know, a little bit of steak and eggs in the morning, or not even eat at all and not get hungry, and just make sure that I do get my calories in within that, you know, window of a few meals that I eat now. So I was literally used to eat about 4 to 6 meals a day. And even if I was eating 6 meals a day, I would have like 2 shakes in between. So it was even 8 meals a day. Because I can't imagine doing that. I was like, how did I get stuff done back then? You know? Maybe that's why I didn't get a whole lot done back then.
I'm 35. How old are you, Don?
42.
42. All right. So we come from like the older school, like, you know, like Bill Phillips was my mentor, you know, the body, you know, the Body for Life guy. And I just thought, man, 7 meals a day, man, you got to do it, you know. And now, you know, with intermittent fasting and now the ketogenic diet, I'm telling you, it's just like liberated. Like I can eat anywhere and like I can make it happen. You know, I don't feel restricted. People say it's restricted. I don't feel restricted at all, man. Like I don't even have a taste. Like honestly, you said your palate changes. Like I can't even really see myself eating cake or anything, and it's like voluntary. Like I'm not a slave to my cravings anymore, I feel like.
Yeah.
That's one of
you know, my wife eats, she does not eat the ketogenic diet. She'll eat ketogenic meals sometimes and she's fine with it. And I test a lot of ketogenic foods and stuff. And I see it and she notices it too. I mean, when she eats sugar, like 2 or 3 hours later, she's hungry again.
She's down. Or she hits crashes, right? She gets
she crashes. I mean, and you know, and she's like, I'm hungry. We need to pull over, like that sort of thing. Immediately. But she likes, you know, she likes the taste of carbohydrate-based food. She likes, and I wouldn't tell people to stop if they can reach their fitness goals and things like that.
Yeah.
But I would say give the ketogenic diet a chance. If you're curious about it, it's not going to do you any harm. It's not going to make explosive tumor growth in your body. Like
your blood, your cholesterol is probably, like, all your health markers will probably go down, will probably improve, right? You know?
Exactly. Yeah. And anytime you're improving, biomarkers like lowering inflammation, reducing, insulin, and improving your triglycerides, which is probably one of the biggest things that comes out. All these things are going to have major impacts on preventing age-related chronic diseases, whether it be rheumatoid arthritis or Parkinson's, Alzheimer's disease, age-related dementias, inflammatory disorders, things like that, and cancer. I think you're going to go a long way. And for me, you could do it in various approaches. You can use an if it fits your macros approach and moderate your calories and be very controlled about it. But, with the ketogenic diet, many people find inadvertently, without even trying, being obsessed and preoccupied. See, I see a lot of people, man, they're like obsessively preoccupied with counting calories and doing all this thing. You'll find that when you do the ketogenic diet, and many people, most people, their appetite will match their energy needs, right? So if you're bolusing sugar or processed carbohydrates, your appetite in many people, as evidenced by our, type 2 diabetes, obesity epidemic, many people will not auto-regulate their appetite to match their energy output. So the ketogenic diet, I think, does that quite nicely, that it controls your appetite, satiates you, and puts various metabolic drivers and the neuroendocrine system and your whole neuropharmacology of your brain, because that's what I study. It puts that into a position where you're more effortlessly able to match your calorie intake to your body's output. So it's and that's the benefit. And it's not for everybody, but it's a very powerful tool in the toolbox of diets that has profound effects. And people like the effects because it's very fast. People like to get results fast. The results are really fast.
The results are fast. A lot of the criticism I hear from the fitness community is that, oh man, you just have to, it only works because of restricting calories. Now, even if that were true, let's just say that were true, like, most people, like you say, inadvertently restrict the calories when they're on ketogenic diet because they're more full, and actually, when carbs are addictive, sugar is addictive. Like, there's studies to prove this, right? So that's not, to me, that's not a drawback. That's a feature. That's not a flaw. That's a feature. The fact that you don't want to eat enough or eat more, you automatically put yourself in a deficit or match your energy needs, and you're just more full and you feel better on a diet than when you're restricted and you have to weigh everything and count everything. And it's difficult to, food labels are allowed to be 20% off, right? So it's like counting calories, that makes it kind of difficult,
Absolutely. Yeah. And there is a debate whether there's a quote unquote metabolic advantage to a ketogenic diet versus, and I think that's kind of silly because, from my perspective, maybe you're like this too. My energy, needs of my body were so high when I was, especially in my teens and early 20s. It was the biggest thing that I hated about, powerlifting or strength training was that I had to force feed my body all the time. So that was, so now I don't have to do that, right? Because the ketogenic diet, the food on your plate is much more energy dense. So you could eat less food, but it's very indulgent food. It's food that I would otherwise try to limit or restrict because I would have to eat massive piles of rice and other things and fish to get my calorie needs. So the food, I take my time, my wife and I, we have like a sit down breakfast on the days I don't intermittent fast. And we always have kind of a sit down dinner and kind of make, and just kind of enjoy our food and eat it. And that's, I don't count calories or anything anymore. If I was going to get serious back into fitness or had some kind of thing to prepare for or had to lose weight, eventually I want to do like maybe an Ironman or something like that. So I'd have to probably bring my weight down. I would probably start calculating just to make a science experiment out of it. But And I actually encourage people, if people are really going to do the ketogenic diet, they really do need to count their macros. And
they got to count the macros.
Some people, some people,
initially,
I mean,
first,
you could sit down, you're on a quote unquote ketogenic diet and you sit down in front of the TV with a bag of macadamia nuts or cashews, and then you could do a lot of damage, right? Like you could easily overshoot 1,000 calories. I know I can with certain types of foods too. So that I really do emphasize that people do, and there's some personality types, it's more of a psychological thing. They, physiological, their body may be telling them that I'm satiated, I'm full, you don't need any, but psychologically, they don't know when to stop. So that's why, so I am a big fan of if it fits your macros for ketogenic diet. So
I
for
get
many
that.
people, like, to do that, but just to like experiment and to have that's just one tool in the tool. But if you've tried other approaches and you're using this approach, but you feel hungry and cranky and you have brain fog, I have, maybe a biased opinion that the ketogenic diet may be a really good approach to you. But I don't sell it like that. I just kind of present it as an option. Obviously, I mean, we're studying it for very specific kind of niche applications like CNS oxygen toxicity. No one's probably never ever heard of that, but that's like the major foundation of the research that I do. Cancer cachexia, which is muscle wasting, like preventing that, inflammatory disorders, various types of seizures, anxiety, behavioral neuroscience is kind of what we study. But body composition, we also study this. So as it relates to the anti-catabolic effect that ketones have.
That's right.
So, and that brings me to like a dieting situation. So humans are able to fast for prolonged periods of time, up to like 40 days, we know, and even longer. So the biggest case is 382 days of fasting for a guy that was like 500 pounds. If his body did not make ketones, he would have quickly broken down all the, amino acids, gluconeogenic amino acids in his skeletal muscle and wasted away and died. His heart would have shriveled up. He would have died. So ketones are, by virtue of their ability to sustain fuel supply to the brain, they prevent protein from being broken down, for amino acids. So they are very anti-catabolic or protein sparing. So in a dieting situation, I think you may have, be at a really good benefit if you're doing intermittent fasting to maybe consume some exogenous ketones during that intermittent fasting phase, because I think it has an anti-catabolic effect. Perhaps branched chain amino acids too. I think the jury's still out on that. But we do know just through evolutionary biology that ketones have a powerful protein sparing effect. And that's why humans were able to, if we did not, if the state of fasting, as it pertains to humans, because they have a lot of adipose tissue relative to other species out there, if they did not go into a state of ketosis, the humans that didn't go on to survive to be here now. So if, we are basically hardwired to fast periodically, and the people that survived in a very robust way, they became more lucid and more they actually functioned better because they were able to go forage for food and kill the animal in a fasted state, and then propagate, their bloodline essentially. So this is eating, 3-4 meals a day continuously, day in and day out, is largely silencing a genetic program or a metabolic state that our bodies are hardwired and used to being in. And I think so it's important to bring that out and to put our bodies in that state periodically as a health preventative measure.
If I'm cutting, right, just cutting like a weight, I got a competition or a photo shoot, because ketones are anti-catabolic, like you've been saying, am I likely to retain more muscle than on a traditional diet, or will it be, or does it matter?
If you use a ketogenic diet without supplemental ketones.
If I'm just maybe MCTs or something, am I likely to retain more muscle, or will supplementing with ketones actually help me retain more muscle while I'm burning fat? What's the best way to keep as much muscle when I'm dieting?
I would say this, based on what we know. I would say you could keep the same amount of muscle, and Insulin's also very anabolic and also anti-catabolic, right? So as is ketones, but you're in two different kind of physiological states there. What I would say is that you can retain the same amount of muscle and strength, but get a greater degree of fat loss. So overall, your body composition alterations will be more favorable with a ketogenic diet by virtue of greater fat loss, with the same amount of protein muscle sparing effects.
Same.
Of course,
Okay.
there's like, yeah. And that's for controlling total calories. So I think if you have two diets and you control for total calories, I would argue that you are definitely burning more fat on a ketogenic diet, that the fat loss would be easier, and that you're going to be burning more fat because you're giving your body fat as fuel too. And I think that your results would be better just by virtue of the diet's going to be easier to follow. But I think, and if you control, and a lot of people bring this up, and rightly so, if you control for calories, I don't know of any studies, very good controlled studies that kind of compare the two as far as muscle versus fat. I mean, you really need like bigger studies where you nail down specifically, very specifically, how much you eat, because a lot of people underreport.
Yeah.
If you're not counting macros very precisely, I think the results will probably be very, very similar. If you restrict calories to a certain degree and use higher carb, a Western diet, and a ketogenic diet, the fat loss effects, if you control for calories, are going to be pretty similar, and the muscle retention will be similar, but it's going to be easier with a ketogenic diet. Plus, you have the benefit, the neurological benefit of ketones, the anti-inflammatory benefit of ketones, and you just feel better. You have more energy. You can focus.
And your health market, all this.
But it's diet. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question.
It's something that we need to study more. Oh, go ahead.
What about this? I started to cut you off, man. I'm just getting excited, man.
No. I was cutting you off.
I feel like I don't need as much sleep on a ketogenic diet, and I don't know if this is good or bad. If it's something that you've noticed. I've heard you talk about on other podcasts that it is something you notice. Yeah. Is it good or bad? Is it good to not have more? Like, should I be forcing myself to get more sleep, or is my body just saying, "Hey, man"? Like, I woke up at 5 today. My alarm was set for 6:30. I woke up at 5. And my body, like, just automatic. My body's like, "Yeah, it's good. Let's go." I just feel fine. Yeah. Is that normal, and is that good or bad? Because a lot of me and my like other entrepreneur friends who are basically all of us are doing keto, right? And we've all, man, we don't need as much sleep. But I'm like, is this a good thing, and is this normal?
I think it's normal. It's one of the things that I experienced early on when I started following the ketogenic diet. I started waking up earlier and earlier each day. Instead of waking up at 7, I started waking up at like 6 and then 5:30. And I would get up and get right to work and start working on things. So what I find, so sleep is something I'm really interested in studying. And we did actually study it in a recent, the NASA NEMO mission. And we collected a lot of data that we're going through now. What I find on the ketogenic diet is that I can sleep less, about 6 to 6.5 hours. And my deep sleep is deeper. And I think I get more REM sleep too. And I feel... the purpose of sleep, let's figure out, okay, the purpose of sleep is for your brain to basically recover, consolidate memories. I mean, I did my PhD in a pulmonary critical care, but it was also a sleep lab. I did it among MDs where they studied sleep. So we would frequently talk about, kind of philosophically, like what's sleep for? So I think the sleep is to regenerate brain energy metabolism and also to regenerate the neurotransmitters that our body is going to use throughout the day, and the central nervous system is going to use throughout the day. When you're in a state of ketosis, the ketones, being in a state of ketosis provides various precursors for neurotransmitters, including 2-oxoglutarate or alpha-ketoglutarate. Alpha-ketoglutarate becomes glutamate, which then through glutamic acid decarboxylase becomes GABA. And other neurotransmitters the ketogenic diet can provide precursors to these neurotransmitters to help replenish them during sleep. And I think being fat adapted and keto adapted, it allows the brain to re-energize faster at nighttime. So that these are theories that I'm throwing out. So I'm speculating. It may actually help to divert glucose and ketones into pathways that can help produce neurotransmitters. So it may actually have like a glucose sparing effect to some extent. If you're not using your muscles and things like that while you're sleeping, you could be directing various energy metabolites down pathways that can help replenish neurotransmitter stores. So this is actually a big focus on the epilepsy and the seizure community, because there's higher levels of various things that help to balance brain neuropharmacology. And there's neuroscientists that are studying this, but they're studying this in the context of the neuroprotective effects and the anti-seizure effects. So if the brain has more neurotransmitters like GABA, for example, your brain is less likely to go into a seizure. So, and we know the ketogenic diet does this, we just don't know yet how it does it. So these are some of the things that we're studying in the lab right now. But my theory is that, you know, when you're following a ketogenic diet and sustaining nutritional ketosis by virtue of elevated ketone levels, that your sleep requirements decrease on average about 30 to 60 minutes per night. And that's 30 to 60 extra minutes per day that has been useful for me, because I used to only need 8 hours of sleep. Actually, last night I only got 5.5 hours of sleep, but I feel fine. You know, I typically need a little bit more than that, but, you know, I function fine off 3. What I have seen is that no matter what, you know, supplements you use or what state of ketosis, if I miss, it takes about 3 nights of sleep deprivation where I sleep 3 hours, maybe miss a night of sleep on a red eye because I can't sleep on a plane, and then don't get in, like, I break down pretty fast. So I'm actually really interested in kind of preventing or developing ways to quickly get your body, you know, to recover from sleep debt.
Dom,
so
I'm gonna help you out.
Ketosis, though.
I'm gonna help you out real quick, Dom. I couldn't sleep on planes for years. I do a lot of traveling. I couldn't sleep on planes for years. You got to get one of the neck pillows, some goofy ones, but get like the real expensive one, like the most expensive one you can find. The nice ones, they're like thinner and they don't look as goofy. Get a eye mask and like these noise canceling earphones.
Okay.
And let me say, play static. Get like one of those apps that play static. White noise, and block everything off. It was the only time I've been like, now I can sleep. I had to go to Australia, and I was like, man, I'm gonna be up this whole time. You know, and then I was able to sleep. You know, like, oh, all right, cool. And then I've been able to duplicate that. Maybe it won't work, but like, it's these 3 things: the noise canceling headphones, the eye mask, and the thing, and I'm able to sleep on red eyes now.
I gotta get the neck thing.
The neck thing's a game changer.
I bought I bought like the expensive noise cancellation earphones, but they're not the earbuds. And when I was sleeping underwater in the Aquarius habitat for the NASA mission, there's like noise from pipes and everything like that. I was told that I needed these, but the white noise actually in that habitat quickly put me to sleep. And I slept better than I've ever slept before. But on a plane, my main thing is the neck. So, and I have a cheap neck brace, but it just didn't work. So I have to, maybe I'll look on Amazon and just see, you know, which one's got the.
I'll send you over the one I use. I'll send you the one. I'll send you the link to the one I use. Because one of my buddies, he's a professional public speaker, so he's always flying around. And he told me, I was like, man, I don't want to wear that goofy stuff. And then it helped, you know. Anyway, so anyway, you know, but I got another question, man. I'm sorry if am I taking up too much of your time? You got to
No, I love questions. Yeah.
All right. A lot of people have been making a big deal about the ketogenic diet. I guess there was a study somewhere where they said it lowers testosterone. Is that true, and is that something that should be that's a concern? I haven't tested my testosterone on since I've been in, but I feel, you know, the indicators, if you will, of testosterone seem to be fine, if not elevated. You know, could you speak up to that?
So in the study that we did with trained athletes or lifters, their testosterone went up 30%, like 28 to 30%, you know, but it stayed within reference range. So that could be, you know, going from like 400 or 500 to, you know, 600 or 700 or something like that. I find that my testosterone it's never been above normal, and it did go below normal, but only when I fasted, when I did extended fasting. So calorie restriction.
Like how
so
that was like days of
emphasize,
fasting though, right? That's not intermittent fasting for a few hours. That was
yeah.
like 5 days of fasting, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
And it was within normal range. It was, I use various like hormone kits. So like, I don't know if you could see it, the ZRT labs, you know, hormone kits, and I do blood in addition to that and compare the two. And I actually do a lot of testing on these things. And what I find is that my testosterone is very sensitive to your calorie intake, right? So if I'm at a calorie deficit, even a mild calorie deficit, it's almost like I see my testosterone in parallel. It will go down from 500 or 600, right, down to like 300 or 400 if I'm holding like a 20% calorie deficit. And then and it's up to a certain point. And right now, I'm actually in the process of testing again. I've been doing a mild surplus calories to gain 1 pound per week because I'm recovering from a period where I had to get my body weight down. So, and the last test I did was like 4 weeks into that, and I saw about a 20% increase, you know, in testosterone, but always within the reference. So instead of like 500, it was like, you know, 625 or something like that. So it'll probably go up and be what I think optimized for myself. The ketogenic diet provides, you know, if you're eating animal fats, cholesterol, dietary cholesterol, which has very little, if any, impact on, you know, your body's cholesterol.
You say that again? Just say that one more time. Just say that. I've been trying to tell people this. They don't believe me. Can you just say that one more time?
Dietary cholesterol has little or no impact on your body's cholesterol levels. You know, even actually, that's why you won't find cholesterol on the back of nutritional information. So the ADA and USDA, they felt that it was necessary to dietary cholesterol had such a little or no impact that it actually should be taken off of food labels.
Oh,
so
that's why it's taken off.
You will not find a food label now that has, you know, dietary cholesterol even listed on it. Most importantly, so a lot of the cholesterol, you know, from your diet can be driven by saturated fat, but cholesterol, I'm telling you, it's been demonized. My colleague, Dr. David Diamond, gave a fantastic talk at IHMC, an institute that I work, which talked in-depth discussion about the science, how the science kind of demonized dietary cholesterol and even statins, and why statins are really in most cases not a good way to go to bring down your cholesterol.
Yeah, I was scared. That's why I went to keto instead of statins, you know. But we lost it a second ago. I distracted you. The cholesterol, how does cholesterol is like, it's like technically a steroid, right? It helps.
It is.
Yeah, it increases.
It's a precursor.
Yeah.
Yep. So you know, it becomes a precursor for sex hormones, and one of them, you know, testosterone's a big one. So keeping your body restricting, you know, dietary cholesterol is a surefire way to decrease your testosterone. But I think more importantly, just any kind of diet that calorie restricts you to a certain degree and it's prolonged over time. Of course, intermittent fasting is not going to do it if you meet your calorie needs, you know, day in, day out. But if you take someone who's on a eucaloric diet and calorie restrict them 50% of their calories for 1 week, by the end of the week, their testosterone is going to be lower. So that's pretty sure thing. And also if you overtrain. So you get a lot of guys, if they follow a ketogenic diet, a lot of times they may be, and they're starting some kind of dieting phase. So they're cutting calories and their output is higher. So you could take guys, and I see this all the time, these endurance athletes and even, you know, bodybuilders or fitness athletes, and they bump up their training for competition and their testosterone goes down. But, you know, there's a number of guys that I know that are elite level, like natural, completely drug-free bodybuilders or athletes or even military guys. They're not on any form of supplemental testosterone, and their testosterone is really low, like almost like 200, sometimes 100, but they are strong as an ox, and they have, they don't have any like signs. Sometimes they get a little bit grumpy or things like that. But I think their body training makes your body much, much more sensitive to the hormones that we have. It's kind of like insulin, right? Like if you train, your body becomes much more insulin sensitive. And I think the same thing is applied to guys and testosterone sensitivity. So they may just have an abundance of androgen receptors on the muscle membrane, or the androgen signaling pathways are so robust upon activation of the hormone to the receptor. And these are some of the things I used to teach in the past. I used to just teach the textbook stuff, but would go back to some of the literature and see like, wow, you could really amplify this pathway 10 times more. You could have a decrease in androgen receptors, but get, from the effector to the pathway, you could amplify it by the signaling pathway if it was upregulated in the cell. And, it's interesting that resistance training actually can increase the production of that particular signaling pathway independent of the androgens or even androgen receptor density on the skeletal muscle. So I think, it's complicated, but I think what's important for guys to know is that strength training and recovery, taking a sufficient amount of recovery and preventing overtraining, although your body can adapt pretty well to overtraining, can increase the sensitivity of your body to these hormones, to testosterone. So
got it.
You could be running a low testosterone, but still, be maybe get a greater anabolic effect, from the testosterone that you have. And I remember, getting on the forums where some guys was asking me questions. Like, I'm not a hormonal guru and things like that, but he sent me some information. He was going to start a steroid cycle or something, and he was into intermittent fasting, and he showed me some data, and he asked me my opinion, and I was like, all I can do is I'll read whatever information you send me. And the information was pretty legit, that if you do some mild calorie restriction and maybe intermittent fasting before introducing like an exogenous form of steroid testosterone, your body will become much more receptive to it and more sensitized to it. So you'll make more gains. But I kind of think of it from the perspective of the guy who just wants to use his own testosterone naturally. There's different ways to do that. And I think intermittent fasting, and I do think that specific types of resistance training makes our body much more sensitive to testosterone.
Like compound, big compound lifts, you mean? Like,
Absolutely. And recovery. So no matter, you need to get a day, sometimes 2 days of full recovery, sleep, sunshine, relationships. Like, it's a whole balancing act. And these things help to restore your testosterone and optimize it for maximum effect.
No, that's
multifactorial.
That's good. That's good. Okay. This may be personal. Since when I've been, I'm calorie restricted now, like, just because I'm getting, like I told you, I'm getting ready for this event. My output is more. I'm probably doing, I'm lifting every day, and then maybe some HIIT cardio after that, and then don't do another session later in the day of just like walking for like an hour, 90 minutes. Right? I'm really trying to get shredded. My ketone levels are lower than they, like, it's like I'm barely in ketosis. Like, I'm like 6, 7, sometimes 8, on a good day. Is that normal when your output is more? Am I using the ketones in my body? Like, and that's why there's less in my blood? That's my theory, but I don't know.
Yeah, I see this in athletes too. And you could do like what I guess you would call, there's a glucose tolerance test, right? And athletes, if they consume glucose and then look at the rise in glucose over time, a person who's sedentary will have a big spike in glucose and then it'll come down. But a person who's like an athlete, right, will have an attenuated rise in that glucose because their peripheral tissue, there's more glucose disposal into the tissue. So the more you're in a state of ketosis, the more beneficial effects you get from it, and the greater ketone transport and utilization you'll have in peripheral tissues. So you'll have greater ketone disposal. So if I'm sitting here at my desk and my ketones are 3 millimolar and I do a brisk walk around campus and come back, I could be down to below 0.2 or like 0.5 or, something like that. It can, because it's a fuel that your body's using. So you could be sucking it up from your body. So if you do measure ketones, it's really important to do it if you've been sedentary, it's sitting in your spot at the desk or whatever for at least like an hour, right? So that's way so that the ketones can kind of build up in your blood a little bit and you're not actively moving around and using them. So that's the only way to get a reliable measure from it. And you could take an athlete and consume like a concentrated form of ketones and a ketone ester and put them on a bike, and then you can see that level go down very fast. And that's a good reflection of that person is actually a really good ketone utilizer. Whereas if you take maybe a person that's a couch potato and have them drink a ketone ester to get their ketones way up, and you start exercising them, you might see a much slower decrease in their ketone levels because their body has not adapted to the transport. There's various transporters like the monocarboxylic acid transporter, and there's type 1, 2, 3, and 4, and these are distributed differently in different tissues. And the muscle and the CNS and various tissues will upregulate these transporters up to 50% within a month or two following the ketogenic diet. So you get these ketones across cell membranes and across different things so they can be utilized into pathways where there's also an upregulation of ketolytic enzymes, which allow those ketones to be transformed into energy. And all these things are kind of upregulated over time. So it's not common, it's not uncommon. What you describe is that, athletes in particular may be registering low ketone levels, especially if you're active and moving around. So to really get an accurate reflection of what your ketone levels are, and if you're making them, is to just be sedentary, if you can do that.
I'm at a standing desk, Dom.
Yeah,
I don't even sit down at work.
Yeah, my desk is standing too. Actually, right now I just sat down because it was.
You got the Vera desk?
Yeah, I got the Vera desk.
It's the same one I got, the Vera desk. Yeah,
my students bought it for me. Yeah,
that's awesome. Okay, so that's good to know. I mean, sometimes I would get frustrated. Question? Yeah, sometimes I would get frustrated. Like, man, I'm doing everything right, and I'm a guy who actually I'm a little neurotic, right? So I walk around with a scale in my bag. I go to places if they don't have their stuff on my fitness pal, I actually weigh it, like in front of people. Everyone's looking at me, but and I'm like, so when I say that I'm doing the keto macros, I'm like, yeah, man, I'm doing everything right. What's happening? But my theory was that I was actually using the ketones, and that helps me. That definitely helps me. I appreciate that. I heard you say on Joe Rogan that you get the more you're on the ketogenic diet, the better, like the effects get better and better over time. Can you explain that to me a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I could tell you, even from my personal perspective and just communicating with hundreds of people, once you start the ketogenic diet, there's this learning curve that you go through, right? So it's like a lot of the benefits, it's kind of sometimes hard to figure out. Is it just because you're figuring out what your macro ratios should be, your food selection? It's like, maybe I shouldn't be eating all this cheese, or dairy doesn't work good with me. So, but regardless, I mean, if you look at animal studies, for example, there are adaptations, what we call keto adaptations over time, or some of the things that, I talked about a little bit, where there's an upregulation of various proteins that are associated with the transport of ketones and with the utilization of ketones as an energy source. And, and so the more you do it, it's like anything. If you take somebody who's adapted to high carbohydrates and give them the ketogenic diet, that's a stress to their body. I mean, they might actually have, some people get the keto rash, some people get the keto flu, some people's immune system kind of collapses, and I think a lot of these effects can be mitigated with ketone supplements, can be helpful. But I think once your body adapts, and that's going to be different for different people, then you start to reap the benefits of ketones with having beta hydroxybutyrate elevated. And it doesn't have to be 2 or 3 or 5 millimolar. I just think elevating it to 1 millimolar is 10 times higher than a normal person would have, on a normal diet. And that represents a significant amount of energy and a powerful signaling molecule in your blood, just getting up to 0.5 to 1 millimolar. So that's actually radically changing things, in your body from different standpoints. So if you do that over time, I think you're going to find some really significant effects. And you could, look at this from the perspective of I kind of look at it from the perspective of patients that have done this for type 2 diabetes and obesity. If you look at inflammatory markers, if you look at metabolic markers, like these things kind of improve over time after about 3 months. Then they kind of level off after about 3 months, the health biomarkers. But if you look at like advanced athletes, it may take about 6 months for them to kind of get back into to be optimized to the point where they're actually making now personal records in their, whether it be in the lifting in the gym or on the track or on the cycle. A lot of cyclists are using this, where it takes about a half a year of adapting to the diet and adapting to, it's really a lifestyle and eating this way, to the point where their body has adapted, where it's actually, they've changed probably even, through mitochondrial biogenesis or even enhancing and upregulating various metabolic pathways to use fats and ketones better as a fuel source. And it may be, in some cases, a lot of these athletes do use small amounts of carbohydrates, but they still stay ketogenic because their output's so high. So they're not decreasing their body's ability to use glucose as an energy source. They are just leveraging the ability to use more fats and ketones as an energy source.
Kind of like when an endurance runner hits the wall and then they start using, they switch into ketosis, whether they wanted to or not. It's kind of like living in that, or being able to access that state more frequently, is what you're saying.
Yep. And when you hit the wall, essentially what that means is that fuel flow to your brain is compromised in some way. So if you have ketones elevated, that's going to prevent you from bonking, because your brain is going to say it's happy now, it's getting enough fuel source, from your liver glycogen, or even muscle glycogen could be tapped out if you're doing these super high races or ultra marathons, which I would never do. But
no, me neither. We're too big for that, Dom.
Yeah,
we're too big for that.
Bang up my knees but yeah. So you're just leveraging a different fuel source, so you have like a backup system of energy for your brain, and that prevents you from bonking, and keeps you. It probably has a big role on perceived exertion too. So if your brain is getting steady fuel flow, then your perceived exertion or dysphoria or whatever kind of situation you get into when you bonk is going to be mitigated.
Is that why a lot of athletes do the targeted ketogenic diet, where they'll take some carbs right before training? What are your opinions? Is that what you're talking about? Like no carbs, only like carbs before training, so they can like have some extra energy and then transition into burning. First they're burning glucose, then they're burning fat, burn off all the glucose.
That's one strategy. I think the people that are using this most successfully are guys that are in the off season. They train low carb, so they're always, especially by the end of the day after they're training, they're hitting some pretty high ketone numbers, like 2, 3, sometimes 4. And then so they train their body to use fat more efficiently as a fuel source, and then they'll do some pre like event trainings where they do like a half of what they would do in an event, and then they experiment with adding some slow burning carbohydrates in, like a UCAN starch or some other high molecular weight starch that burns slow but doesn't evoke an insulin response or a real big spike in glucose. Just a slow burning carb, like a slow carb, like Tim Ferriss would say. So they basically train their body to use fats and ketones without compromising significantly glucose utilization too, because they add like a little bit of carbs in. And then during the game day or during their training event, they'll add, they'll add carbs in, but it'll be nothing like what they used to. Not like 3, 4, 600, 700 grams of carbs. Like they'll use something like, 150 to maybe 200 grams of carbs in on a 6-7 hour race or something like that, like these extreme races. And they'll do really well on that. And they'll bolus in, 30 grams here, another 30 minutes of 30 grams. And they'll mix it too with like different types of fats too. So they're throwing in things and getting a very little rise, if any, in glucose or insulin. And they're using it as they're not storing it in any way. They're using it kind of on the fly.
So it's kind of like how Olympic athletes train in Denver with the altitude, and then they compete somewhere else. The same kind of philosophy.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yep. train high, yeah, compete low. Yep.
Got it. And what about people who do what they call like the cyclical ketogenic diet, like guys who would do I tried this for a brief period of time, and I was able to put on a nice amount of muscle. I would do 5 days. This is after I got adapted for a little while, right?
Yeah,
after I was adapted, I would do 5 days of strict keto, and then I would have like 2 carb days on the weekends, right? And then go back into it. I saw I saw good results of putting on muscle. I didn't put on too much fat. Have you experimented with that, or do you know anything about? What are your thoughts on that kind of diet?
I think it depends on a good way to go about testing that would be to do on the weekends, as you mentioned, instead of binging on carbohydrates and eating, 400 or 500 grams of carbs, on a Saturday and Sunday, add, if you're on like 25 grams of carbs a day, if you're doing like a real like ketogenic diet on the weekends, add, 100 grams of carbs on a Saturday and Sunday. And that may make it, better if you're going out to eat or something like that. And then see how you feel. And then maybe the week after that, add like maybe 200 grams of carbs per day and to see how you feel, see the effects on your body. But if you jump into kind of a cyclical carb thing, and add a lot of carbs real quick. So I'm always, do everything very metered in moderation. So increase really slowly and then, observe, give your body enough time to understand how you react to that, observe, and then repeat and then tweak, repeat, and then, monitor it, see what you look like in the mirror, check the scale, check your strength in the gym, check how you feel, and assess all these parameters and then move kind of in a very calculated way, because different people are going to have different responses. But I think it could be, really useful to do that, especially if you are in a phase where you want to gain muscle or gain body weight over time. Because for some people, they just can't eat enough calories on a ketogenic diet. Because they don't feel hungry.
They're too full.
Yeah. So it might help to get, some extra calories in and do kind of a targeted ketogenic diet approach like that. So that would be my recommendation. But, we haven't studied it enough to know what's optimal. So
I just stay in ketosis because I used to do that, but when I noticed I didn't feel as good, I don't know if I actually felt worse than like my regular, or I just feel so much better in ketosis. Like going down to normal sucked. I don't know which one it was, but I just got to the point. I said, I'm just gonna stay in ketosis, man. I'm not gonna. I just felt a lot better, like physically and mentally.
Same here. Same here. I'll experiment every once in a while, and it's an experiment that I always revalidates myself. Yep, I feel better in ketosis. So I'll choose to stay in ketosis and I don't do it, extreme. I don't do, 90% fat. I just do a very modified form of the diet, and I do routine blood work to make sure everything's okay. So it's not to the point where, it's dangerous in any way, shape, or form, like the way that I do it.
Traditionally, like before like an event or show where I had to have my shirt off or something, whatever, and I would try to take some carbs the night before, the day up, to pump up. You think that's still necessary, or like
No,
I don't know. I think I'm pretty good, and I'm scared to do that because I feel like I'm gonna feel bad,
Yeah.
Should I just stay in ketosis, maybe up my calories or something?
Yeah, just eat more of the same foods. And so if you are eating more of the same foods, the excess protein that you're consuming, or the excess surplus calories, mostly in the form of protein, or maybe even the glycerol from the fats that you're metabolizing, will replenish and restore your glycogen stores. So I think if you're trying to fill out the days before, start ramping up a few days early, start your calories a few days early, and then do some kind of, light movements, nothing too strenuous that's going to like make you hold water or damage the muscle in any way, but just focus on reps and contracting the muscle with relatively lightweight. And then you're going to help replenish and restore and maximize your muscle glycogen just by throwing in, an extra 500 to 1,000 at the most, 1,000 calories per day, or maybe pick 2,000 calories and spread that out over like 3 days or something.
Got it. And maybe cut the cardio out at that point, like right before the show. Okay. All right. Sorry. All right. All right, Migo Dom, man. Listen, I just feel like I could talk to you all day, but I know you got stuff to do, and but this is, man. It's been an honor to speak with you, and just thank you so much. Where should people go to get more information about you?
Yeah, I would say Keto Nutrition, all one word, .org. And I have resources on there. I got, a lot of information on there that I think, will answer a lot of questions that people have about this.
Yeah.
And it's a website. I'm continuing to build it up and add more resources to it, but it has dietitians, it has clinical trials, it has consultants that do things for, body composition and fitness on there too. So that's my go-to website.
Awesome, man. Yo, thanks again, Dom. Just stay on for a second. I'm gonna end it, but thanks again, Dom.
Okay.
Appreciate it, man.